Our speaker this evening, John Hannan, is a Somers, New York resident, longtime Bedford Audubon member, and an avid naturalist, conservationist, and photographer. John has been part of the Audubon family at many levels, including on staff at National Audubon, a past chair of the Audubon New York State Chapters Council, and past and current president of Bedford Audubon's Board of Directors. John has consulted to the American Birds Conservancy, Birds Caribbean, Manomet, and the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. In 2024, he retired from BirdLife International, the world's largest partnership of bird conservation organizations, spanning more than 119 countries with 124 partners and hundreds of collaborating organizations, including the National Audubon Society. We are very, very pleased to welcome John Hannan this evening.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me. And most of all, thank you for your interest in the international partnerships and what many of you already know, the full life cycle conservation of birds from wherever their nesting is, whether it's the Arctic tundra, Oswego, Bedford, New York, all the way down to their non-breeding grounds, which could go as far down as Tierra del Fuego in our Americas. I'm going to take you through some of the wonderful projects I've been able to be part of, some of the things that National Audubon is proposing as many of us chapters begin to think about how we can participate in full life cycle conservation, helping organizations across the Americas, and hopefully a bit of a dialogue at the end. Questions, answers, new questions that can't be answered. We'll get to it all tonight. So as you can hopefully see, the title of tonight's program is Protecting Birds Across Their Whole Migratory Paths or Pathways. And that there actually is good news, even in these days where sometimes it seems like there's nothing but dismal news on the television or on your computer screen. There is good news for linking habitat conservation across the Americas. So we'll jump in and let me see how there we go. So a quick slide that I think a lot of the folks on tonight's webinar may already know. So I'll go quickly through some of these, and if I'm going too fast, just type it into the chat and we'll come back and answer any questions that I left behind, leaving you wondering. But most of you have some idea of the migratory pathways, which on the right, the visual, and that at least half of North America's breeding birds spend more than half of their lives in the southern hemispheres, in Latin America and the Caribbean. These approximately 4.7 billion birds, along with the resident birds and the endemic species that are already down there, are a critical piece of ecosystems. And if you put them all together, we jointly with these birds depend upon the water, the food, and the economic benefit that so much of their own ecoservices provide us. And therefore, we share responsibility for conservation of these birds and their habitats. On the bottom of this slide, I hope you can see it, is just some of the many organizations across the Americas that work together through the BirdLife Partnership from our very own National Audubon Society, up north of us, Birds Canada and Nature Canada, all the way down through the Caribbean, through Central America, through Latin America, all the way down to Aves Argentinas in the Southern Cone. And now we're going to have to, unfortunately, hit upon a couple sad facts. Once again, ones that you probably already are familiar with. Migratory birds are in trouble. Nearly a third of migratory birds have population declines, restricted ranges, population level threats, and these are being caused either through loss of habitat or inadequate habitat management. Uh, it could be on the coast of New York where people want to build mansions where salt marshes used to exist. Uh, it could be in beautiful places along the Susquehanna where people want to build condos and the likes. Um, and our birds are suffering to the point where many of us were shocked, but I think a lot of us already have internalized the report that came out a couple of years ago. That was a joint report of Cornell Lab, ABC, National Audubon, that 2.9 billion birds are gone since the 1970s. Uh, Birds that are most impacted, grassland species. But shorebirds are right behind them. Boreal forest birds and the fires of Canada have not helped in the least in that area over the last few years. Western forest birds, tundra birds, and those that actually are on the least decline happen to be our eastern forest birds, and that's because over the last century or so, more forest has come back into the east as farming decreased in many areas. So how do we reverse the crisis? Well, our own National Audubon, along with all of us as chapters, we've been working on this for the last number of years. And in 2023, a strategic plan called the Audubon Flight Plan was released. It ties into many of the other organizations in the BirdLife Partnership that are working across the hemisphere, supporting each other, working in partnership. And the bottom line was save and restore the most threatened species. For us here in the U.S., more than 227 species that have been in long-term decline. Conserve the most important sites and habitats, which we put together the numbers. This is always a moving target, but we got plenty of room to work with. 3.7 billion acres across the Americas. Promote ecological sustainability by supporting bird-friendly enterprises. Empower communities so they can protect their own natural resources. Sharing resources, sharing training, sharing funding at all levels across the borders. What are the common denominators? Birds first and foremost, uh, people, because we tend to have our footprint across the entire world these days, and there isn't many a place that you go to that hasn't had human either traipsing through it or actually living in it. And because of that, addressing the economies, as I said, looking for bird-friendly or sustainable economies, and then creating that full life cycle conservation. And if you're not familiar with that term, full life cycle conservation, it means instead of us just thinking about, oh, we have chestnut-sided warbler in our local sanctuary, so we'll work on that, or wood thrush in our local forest. We'll work right there. We look at the totality of where that bird travels through its whole migratory path, from the nesting site, which may be in our own chapter area, to key stopover sites. Where are there large congregations of birds? Shorebirds are such an easy example to talk about because it's a very visible congregation. So red knots in the Delaware Bay, because of the horseshoe crabs, the choke points, Veracruz for raptor migration. We have to look at protecting each of those areas, and then once again for shorebirds, all the way down into the Tierra del Fuego or the Chiloé Island for Hudsonian godwit, is a place that 99% of the Hudsonian godwit population will be wintering in. So full life cycle conservation is taking that broad landscape view and figuring out where do we put the limited resources we have so that we're ensuring that in all of those key spots in the bird's life, we've got protections and can make sure that they're conserved. And so where do we start? Once again, we're part of the whole Audubon family. So the easy starting place is to look at the plan that's been laid out because it gives us plenty of spaces to move into, if you will. Um, oh, I'm trying to get the screen so that I'm able to see the whole presentation. I just flipped it out. So just give me 1 second to. There we go. Uh, as you can see, the green is where Audubon is already proposing um, that it, where it's currently working. The blue is where Audubon is proposing to expand to. Um, and I am still just having a little trouble getting a full screen here. If I can,
We see you on the screen now, over the slide currently, John.
yeah, and the slide is a little small, so I'm just trying to get it back to my full screen.
Okay.
And
That looks good on our end.
yeah, I know. I'm just having a little trouble because it's very miniature on my end. Oh, wait a second. I'm just going to stop share and come back into the share because I think that'll be the easiest way to do it. Apologies for. There we go. Much better. Now I can, if there's any bullets that I'm not remembering, I'm able to see them. Sorry about that. So the National Audubon Flight Plan, as I said, we working with all of the organizations across the Americas, we outlined the most strategic places to be working. 3.7 billion acres is it sounds like an enormous amount of land, of sea, of coastline, but when you're talking about the entire Americas, it actually is not, as you can see, that much. The green is, as I said, current priorities. The blue is future priorities. And actually, that's once again a moving target because in places like Brazil, Audubon's already started working. They're talking to Aves Argentinas and expanding that idea. And as I mentioned before, it's looking at working on the most threatened species, promoting ecological sustainability, and empowering communities. Um, and the good news is it's happening. So, a program that I helped with the initial grant writing to get funding for $17 million started Conserva Aves. Um, excuse me. We were able to, when I was at BirdLife and my responsibility was fundraising. Um, through the Bezos Earth Foundation, kick off the program with an investment of 17 million, the majority of which went to looking at establishing, at that time, I think it was 45 new or protected areas across the high Andes. And then another that was about 12 million of the gift. Five million was for the training and empowerment of local communities and local conservation groups so that they had the tools to manage these lands. And then the last million was to pay Audubon, to pay BirdLife, to pay the other key partners for their staffing of the program. Since then, it has expanded. We're now looking at 80 new protected areas, all the way from Mexico to Chile. Um, the Canadian government got really inspired by what BirdLife and Audubon and ABC and Redlac was doing with partners in Latin America. Um, at that time, as I say, it was the high Andes, so it was Colombia, Peru, Ecuador into Bolivia, and the Canadian government said if we give you, I think the total number comes to about 55 million, take this program and bring it to Mexico, bring it to Chile, bring it into Central America. And so that is what's happening. And it's ensuring new protected sites for every endangered and critically endangered bird species across the Americas. That's the final goal, is that every endangered or critically endangered species will have protected areas that are guarding the most significant places it stays during its full life cycle. If we do that, we can bring almost every species back from the brink of extinction. And then dovetailing with that is the America's Flyway Initiative, which Audubon kicked off. I think now it's into year 2 or 3. And it's been IDing and working 30 key land and seascapes, massive ones, though, not just our local IBA, but an entire coastal area that species are using. It's 4.9 million acres. And the idea is to target priority habitat for, once again, those priority species that are under incredible pressure. In the last years that I was working at BirdLife, I was working with species like the Alagoas ant wren, which there are 8 birds in the wild, or the blue-eyed ground dove, which there are 14 birds in the wild. But we have conservation plans that can bring those birds back from that brink, that true brink of extinction. Uh, we're utilizing a variety of habitat and conservation tools. We're integrating humans into the problem and into the solution, realizing that small cacao coffee farmers, we can't tell them not to plant, we can't tell them not to live there. We have to find a solution that integrates their work into the conservation, uh, and in that way, finding solutions that work for all. So taking it to the chapter level, because it's great when we're at, like, for those of you who might have gone up to Montreal for the chapter leaders conference that Audubon did, or we're coming to the council meeting and folks from National Audubon present about all these millions of acres and millions of dollars. We in the chapter level, we probably don't aspire to having that grandiose of a plan. So what can we do to fit into this? So at Bedford Audubon, we were lucky. We started way back in 2014. I was working at National at the time, and so I was able to hear about a program that was part of this International Wood Thrush Alliance. And what we were doing at the time was using the top technology of that 12 years ago, the geolocators. And so we started putting geolocators on locally nesting wood thrushes as part of the whole overall alliance. We had partners in Nicaragua and Panama and Belize, Mexico, all along the wood thrush's migratory path. And we actually found uh, we were able to recapture several of the wood thrushes. We actually pinpointed through the geolocator. Geolocator uses solar technology, was first developed for tracking albatross flight. So you tell the geolocator the time and the longitude and latitude of where you're banding the bird, and then as long as there's sunlight, it tracks. And if you recapture, you can download that information and follow the entire migratory path based on GPS coordinates. Um, we found that our birds in northern Westchester, New York, were wintering in the northeast of Nicaragua. And it happened to also be a place that ABC, American Bird Conservancy, had a project that I ended up working on a couple of years later. So we were able to put people from Nicaragua to help monitoring and looking for the birds when they were down there, working on the habitat, getting local farmers to produce more bird-friendly habitat. Uh, Unfortunately, political climate in Nicaragua for the last 5 or 6 years has turned to the point where it's really difficult to do any kind of international conservation partnerships. So we couldn't continue that project. We did help with some work in Honduras because Honduras in its eastern side is also a place where a lot of the Baltimore Orioles, um, some of our warblers, and our wood thrushes end up wintering. Those of us from the mid-Atlantic states. Things that we're now doing, we're looking to do obviously education. We're close to New York City, so a lot of our partners from Latin America, from the Caribbean, they'll come up to New York City for different conferences, and we optimize that. And this is something we could share with other chapters like yourself, where people can move around and get out to other parts of the state so that they can talk to your membership. We've done lectures like on the slide here. We've done dinners, receptions, and people begin to learn about where the birds of our area end up in their non-breeding season, but also they learn about the birds of Argentina. The grasslands of Argentina host almost all the bobolinks from our area during the winter season, or I should say our winter season, but they also host another assortment of beautiful native birds to Argentina that now actually our chapter, a bunch of the folks from the chapter are going to Argentina to actually see and support that grasslands project. Um, we are also doing work with first generation communities from the countries that we work in. So we here in the northern Westchester area have a very large population of first generation folks from Ecuador, Guatemala, and also some from Colombia. So we've been hosting presentations at the local library and also at our own offices that are in Spanish. They're open to families. The picture you're seeing on your, I think, right-hand side of the screen in the upper picture. Um, One of the local community outreach groups that does work with the Ecuadorian and Guatemalan community, they bussed everybody over to our sanctuary. We did a presentation. It was for families. There was a lot of kids. And then we did a bird walk in the sanctuary. And actually, everybody loved that part. All of the families were like, can we come back here? You mean you don't charge? Your sanctuary is open. When's the next time we can come? Then we had a nice little lunch, and everybody was telling us about the birds that they used to look at when they were back home in their own country. It was really a fabulous way, and we do that now. We have what we call a community walk on the third Sunday of every month. And we have bilingual folks who are at the walk. So for those who have any kind of language barrier, we're able to ensure that know what birds we're seeing and kinds of habitat. And then we've done fun things like member photo exhibits. This last one that we've done that's now toured 7 libraries in our area was called Near and Far, and it was member photos from our own sanctuaries all the way to the wintering grounds of many of the species that we both share in the different countries. So we're looking for all kinds of ways to get people thinking about how it's not just about protecting our backyard, it's about protecting the entire migration and migratory pathway. Other things that we're doing is direct collaborations, connecting with partners. So on our international birding trips, we usually do at least one a year. We meet with the conservation group that's a BirdLife or an Audubon partner. Panama Audubon, Aves y Conservación, Panama Audubon, obviously in Panama, Calidras in Colombia, Aves y Conservación in Ecuador, Aves Argentinas in Argentina. They describe their work. We've made donations. We're talking about actually supporting projects. And we also then actually see the birds right there. You know, the bird that you're seeing, the American oyster catcher, actually was that's in the upper corner. That bird, I saw it in Nicaragua, and I asked the guys, "What? That bird? I know that bird from the bands." I had been doing shorebird monitoring in Long Island Sound off the islands that are just off of Westchester County, and that bird was nesting in the Long Island Sound. And then I guess it was January, I'm doing the International Shorebird Survey in the Bay of Fonseca on the Pacific side of Nicaragua, and I see that bird. And the guys I was working with from Nicaragua, they were like, "Oh yeah, we've recorded that bird 3 years in a row. It comes down here every winter." So we through bands, through telemetrics, through Modus towers now, we're finding exactly where our birds are, and then we can really, as a chapter, invest small amounts of money. We don't need millions because a lot of conservation projects are in the 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, $50,000 level, things that chapters can raise through birdathons, through all of our creative methods. When we're down there, and I really encourage everybody, if they can, to take trips, we can be tourists or we can actually share our work and our experiences. We meet with the groups. In some cases, we can help with trainings. We can support an IBA where birds that we know nest in our area are wintering. Um, we've been able to connect some of the chapters. Aves in Argentinas, actually American Bird Conservancy, and some individual donors in our area are working on a project there. Aves Honduras, North Fork Audubon Society has developed a relationship because of the Baltimore Oriole that they feel is probably, quote, their Baltimore Orioles are ending up in Honduras. Mahunkatuk Audubon Society in Connecticut has been supporting a great Modus project in Finca Canteros in Costa Rica. And then we've got individual donors here who are from Ecuador who are supporting Aves y Conservación. Some, you know, Mahunkatuk is donating funds to purchase equipment. Uh, I was just down in at Finca Canteros 2 weeks ago and was assisting in monitoring. As I mentioned, Norfolk supporting an IBA. There's all different ways of doing it. And what you'll experience is more fun than you can imagine. The corner picture, the Finca Canteros, the group of women who are in their special banding team outfits, that's a group that's been formed called Women Committed to the Earth. All women from the local community who are now getting training. They're becoming banders, master banders themselves. Moving to the right, if you want to go to Colombia and do shorebird surveys in their grasslands, I'll tell you that's one of the most amazing things. 2 weeks out in flooded savanna, you paddle in. You may be eating piranha for breakfast because there's no grocery stores. There's nothing but the local food, but you are seeing thousands upon thousands of shorebirds that you're counting. Or you could be banding down in the Pampas in Argentina. Uh, you might be working on conservation plans or helping students at an international bird festival in Honduras. Or if you're like Bruce Peterjohn and you donate the funds so that the folks who are working on the saffron cow blackbird could purchase a field station. He has a trailer turned field station with his name, the Bruce Peterjohn Field Station. So there's all sorts of ways to participate, and they're all good. You'll work with everybody from cacao and coffee farmers to students who are trying to become conservationists, ornithologists. You'll be out with a whole spectrum of North American, Canadian, South American, Latin American volunteers. You'll have an amazing time. You'll stay in rural communities. You may work with some government folks. You will definitely work with private sector folks, but everybody has one common denominator. They all want to preserve the habitat and protect the birds. Some of it is what we do here. It's all about understanding, whether it's in the classroom. I'll tell you, I was at the University of Honduras, their agricultural, which is where they also do all of the land conservation work. We were supposed to give a presentation at 3 p.m. It was so hot that the electricity blew out across the whole campus. The students stayed till 7 o'clock till it got cool enough that we could get 60, 70 people in one room. I gave a presentation in Spanish to them, and they kept me there till about 10:30 when we finally kicked them all out because they had so many questions about what they can do to protect the habitat, their own lands, and their birds. We have such motivated kids across the globe. It doesn't stop at the Americas. I've been privileged enough at BirdLife to see it all across all 5 continents. But here in the Americas, we just have incredible, incredible desire from youth to participate. The kids, when we did this festival, I brought down a whole bunch of materials from the Environment for the Americas, which is all bilingual. It's all uh, stickers, tattoos to the kinds of bird ID stuff that you see the kids reading there. Everybody from the littlest kid to the oldest person, these communities, they want to protect their land. They want to protect their water. They want to protect the wildlife that they've grown up with. So we have willing partners. And when we're out in the field, you might be once again working with a cacao farmer who's multi-generational. You might be working with some university kids like the ones that you see in my left-hand corner holding the Nicaragua field guide. Um, you could be with a whole different group, like the women committed to the earth. That picture is just from 2 weeks ago, and those are the birds that we banded, and about 8 of them got MODIS tags as part of this project that a Canadian researcher is doing, tracking where the Swainson's thrushes from British Columbia end up during the winter months. Uh, you may even get yourself on TV. I was in Colombia at a program that had about 1,000 ranchers uh, who had gathered with conservationists to discuss how ranching can coexist with bird conservation. So it's amazing across the Americas, the activities and the work that we can participate in. And at the end of the day, the results are we protect habitat by giving incentives to small farmers. The picture of all those little plants, those are shade-grown coffee plants. They are being given away free to farmers if they will follow shade-grown protocols, increasing the habitat so that birds like Nashville, Tennessee, chestnut-sided warbler can live within those coffee fields. I have seen flocks of like 70 Nashvilles going through shade-grown coffee plantations. They love picking all of the insects right off the coffee plants. Uh, the We were in Ecuador in February visiting this one area that Aves de Conservación is working with the community. They're helping the community create a native plant nursery that they're selling to the local community so that actually all the plants are very beneficial for a whole suite of pollinators, especially this one critically endangered species, the black-breasted puffleg, a beautiful, beautiful hummingbird that we only know of 2 places, one of them being that spot that I was in, where those birds nest. Um, all of this work creates community pride, but it also creates employment. And that's that's when you get true conservation because people are proud of what they're doing and they can feed their families. So if you're at all interested, I thoroughly encourage every chapter, find a place that you can plug into. We all like traveling. We all love Christmas bird counts, summer bird counts, hawk watches. All of that is going on in other countries. The picture in the lower left hand of my corner is a number of years ago, I think 2015. I helped organize a Christmas bird count in the Dominican Republic in the Northeast, where part of the Bicknell thrush population ends up wintering. We were training the local park rangers and then local conservation folks so that they could continue it forward, going onward. Holly Gerard is an amazing person in the your lower right-hand corner. She is one of the few people who is out there bilingually training people throughout the Caribbean and Latin America in the proper methods of banding. Right there, she's teaching a young woman how to age the bird through plumage molt. Um, it was a sharp-shinned hawk that flew into our net. It was chasing a gray-breasted wren. The wren got away. The sharp-shin got into the net. So it was a great learning experience for the young woman who had never handled a raptor before. So all of this is the kind of stuff that we can participate depending on our skill level, depending on our ability to travel. And at the end of the day, the goal is to make these projects self-sustaining. We want folks like you, me to go down there, but in the end, we want to embed the skills in the local group so that they don't need us because we can't be there forever. We can assist in teaching data collection, protocols, proper and safe banding methods. We can help organizations that have a lot of very capable scientists design and implement long-term conservation plans, bringing knowledge that we have, but recognizing that they also are very knowledgeable people and especially knowledgeable about their own habitats. And then we pass the baton on, and the local conservation groups take over. When you're down there, you're going to find that unlike our hawk watches, where half the people are touting probably $10,000 worth of optics and cameras, in the field in rural parts of especially Central America and some of the more modest economies of Latin America, folks may be sharing binoculars. The young men who are in that picture, three of them have binoculars. All three of those binoculars were borrowed from the university. It was actually a donation by ABC. So they would check them out and go, and then the guy that doesn't have it, he'd get a turn. You're working with folks who are still putting stuff on pen and paper, or one person may have eBird on their cell phone and they're putting it in there. But it's much more rudimentary than what some of us may be used to. But it is refreshing because it is incredible how people are sharing. I was working with a group of students. We took them for an introductory bird walk. Then the day after the lecture that lasted till 10, about 30 or 40 of them showed up for a 7 a.m. walk after having to take the bus home from the university at 10. We only had 10 pairs of binoculars for about 40 people. Everybody passed the binoculars around so every single person could get a chance of seeing the birds as we did the walk. There's just an incredibly refreshing sense of, even though we don't have all the resources, we'll find a way that everybody is welcome and everybody's involved. And if you don't have a lot of skills, but you still want to go, there's plenty of ability to come as a tourist and see incredible birds like the gray-breasted mountain toucan or plumous kite. The woman who's in the center picture with the tan shirt, she came down as a volunteer. Now, I think almost all of us actually want to make friends with that woman because she's one of the lead software developers making very high-tech equipment for Swarovski. She was touting a pair of binoculars that when you look through them and you pressed a button, they have eBird embedded in the binoculars and it tells you what the bird is. So she came down just on our vacation with her dad, who's standing behind, who actually is works with the Canadian Forest Department. Um, and we were having a terrible time connecting the Modus tags to the antenna, the local antenna, to ensure that they were working properly. And Danny, she had been birding. She came to the banding station and said, "You having a problem? Let me take a look." And she sat down, and being a software genius, she fixed the problem in 10 minutes. So you may go down thinking you're a tourist, but you might end up solving a big problem. So it's all good. Everybody is welcome. And if you can't go, if you can't be part of the group that investigates the project the chapter might want to fund, there's a lot you can still do because every single day we purchase things. And what we purchase on a daily basis probably matters the most beyond all of the things that we can do in a 1 week trip down to a Latin country. Uh, Making sure that the coffee we buy is shade grown, making sure that it's got the proper seals, everything down to chocolate. The cacao is now got there's labels for cacao. There's labels for maple syrup from Vermont and I think even New York now. There's bird-friendly beef. There's organic cottons. There's so many ways that when we purchase daily items that we use in the house and we wake up to chocolate we eat as a treat or some people all the time, uh, we can make sure that these are sustainable products. And the more we do that, the more our birds are going to be able to continue to have habitat throughout their whole life cycle. And most importantly, just keep on spreading the word because we need every single one of us, every chapter member involved in this massive plan if we're really going to address all those millions of acres that National Audubon's strategic plan envisions will be able to save the birds with. So that brings me to the end of the program. I ready to take questions and hope that this has been both enjoyable and educational. So maybe I'll stop screen sharing and be able to see what everybody's doing.
Thank you, John. Fascinating. Lots and lots and lots of things to think about. One particular question that I'd like to share. Nancy says there have been some studies that show males and females of the same species winter in different locations and habitats within their wintering range. Yet conservation projects have traditionally focused on the habitats supporting males of the species. Is there an effort to identify and equally protect areas inhabited by males, females, or even both sexes?
Yes. Uh, you're Nancy's absolutely right. Um, Wood thrushes, bicknell thrushes, some of our favorite birds, Kentucky warbler is another one. Those males are belligerent and they will push the females and young birds right out of the pristine forest that has always been the traditional one that oh my God, we got to protect that pristine forest. So now a lot of our conservation partners are discovering, oh, wait a second, that patch that we thought was crummy, that's chock filled with females. We need to protect that. So that picture that I showed you of the training for the Christmas bird count in the Dominican Republic is a perfect example of that. The the pristine forest that male bicknell thrushes go to in the Dominican Republic is in the south west of the Dominican Republic, almost on the border with Haiti. All the females and the young birds are up in the northeast, and that was where we were doing the Christmas bird count to get more work. There's several people in Vermont Institute for Nature Studies, VINS is very involved in this, getting the landowners and the farmers in that area protecting their forests so that the females and the males and the young birds can exist. Um, there's a lot of in Honduras is the same way. There's degraded forest, and there we'll find golden wing warbler females. And we're working to be able to balance both of those things, the pristine where the males have all decided they're taking up shop, and secondary forests that are less and in some cases really degraded. But if we don't protect those, the female and young birds won't survive.
Wow.
Really good question. Um,
Excellent. Yeah. I was wondering if one went down to those regions to volunteer, um, must one have knowledge of native languages?
um, I mean, obviously, it always helps, but in most cases, in this day and age, so many people across not just the Americas. It used to be you couldn't go to France unless you spoke French because the French wouldn't speak to you in anything but French. Now, especially the young people, everybody wants to speak English to you. And in fact,
Hmm.
I speak Spanish and I want to use it so that it stays in my old brain, as I uh and they're like, no, 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 we want to speak English. We want to learn make sure our English is good. So you you will have and when you're coming to help, even if you're stumbling with trying to speak Spanish, people will, laugh. They'll enjoy the mistakes you make as well as the good. But yeah, if you're going down, I wouldn't say just jump in a plane, get off and say I'm here. You work with whether it's national or through people in the local chapter who have an idea of a project. But going in an organized group and not speaking the primary language is perfectly fine. Everybody wants to see you there.
Thank you.
Hi,
Andy.
John, what are your thoughts on ecotourism? Is that a plus overall, or is it a mixed bag?
Well, I mean, obviously, the folks who want to tell us that we're all, Birkenstock liberals and and will throw that, traveling to these places is using up fuel. So that I would say is the only downside to ecotourism is there is, you're consuming fuel to get there. Uh, the upside is that it is a multi-billion-dollar industry that encourages vast protection of land. I cannot tell you in Ecuador, for instance, where they've had ecotourism for many years because their neighbors, Peru, Colombia, had civil wars. So those of us that wanted to see tropical birds would tend to be headed to Ecuador. You drive down and every farm has figured out, oh, we have a tapaculo or we have a trogon. And, there's a little sign going, it's, spot-breasted tapaculo, $5 per person. And you stop and, the wife or the son, the husband's out in the fields doing his work. The wife will take the money and, the son will take you down to this little, and you say, okay, everybody stop. And then he'll make a little noise, and this bird will walk out and we all take a picture. We all like amazingly look at it for 10 minutes and okay, show's over. So at the very low level, it's a boom industry. And then at a larger level, Colombia, when they were, thank goodness, after 30 years, they were able to sign a peace treaty and bring their civil war to a close. They and a lot of the international community that helped broker the peace accord realized if we don't have income in the highlands, people are going to go back to saying, maybe I need to pick up a gun because I'm still starving. Uh, so they have invested a huge amount into ecotourism, and National Audubon actually got a $4 million grant back in the days when USAID existed, and did training of young people in the communities. AID was doing great. In Nicaragua, they did a plan that got one lodge to do zip line, one lodge to do birds, one lodge to do kayaking, so that you could go up and spend a whole period, 2 weeks, and like we do in the Adirondacks and stuff. We'll do mountain biking one day, we'll go hiking the next day. So people could really immerse themselves and everybody could get a piece of the action. So you weren't all like trying to compete for just the birds or whatever. But there's a lot of people now in Ecuador. You have three different levels of bird guide that you get certified from. I can just identify and point the birds out to. I'm bilingual. I know the names of the birds in their scientific, their English, and their local. So, I can lead international tours and people can make really good income. I'll give you just one example, then we can move to another question. But a friend of mine who is a wonderful ornithologist, they have a shade-grown coffee plantation in Nicaragua. Um, Two of her guys who used to be just coffee pickers, making about $4 a day, became really interested in the birds and started saying, "Can I help with the tours and stuff when you have people come?" Well, they get paid their daily wage, but all of us say, "Oh, that was terrific. You got us, 80 species in 3 hours. I'll give you a $20 tip." One guy on my trip, he did this by mistake. He had reached into his pocket and he thought he was handing a 20 and he gave the kid $100. And I said he just made like what he would have made for the entire season picking coffee. But that people are like, wow, in one day I'm making 80, $100. How long would that have taken me at $4 a day? So there's a real advantage, and it makes people think I need to protect the forest. I need to protect the
Hmm.
grassland because that's why these people are all coming and staying at my place.
Good.
Wow. I was wondering, since inception, are habitats being impacted by climate change?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's um I where I was doing field work in Nicaragua, northeastern Nicaragua, traditionally really rainy area, partial rainforest, but also just in the part of the reason why agriculture was great there. Um, in the last few years, almost drought. It's all of the globe is experiencing the and we can't even call it say that it's all getting hot, although obviously we're experiencing the hottest summers on record each, but it's more these severe, when it does rain it floods, but then it doesn't rain for 2 months and the people's crops fail. It's all in just these massive waves, um, and that is also in that, and also the epidemics, Zika, um, the avian flu virus, chikungunya, uh, these different kinds of diseases that were spread by mosquitoes. A lot of the poorer countries have just said, well, we can't afford to have our whole population showing up at the hospital, so they're fumigating every day. So on top of crop destruction and the like, you're losing all of the insects, whether they're beneficial pollinators, the
Wow.
butterflies and stuff. But I used to, in 2010, 2012, we would swab ourselves in mosquito repellent before we went out and monitoring. I was in Costa Rica in a rainforest 2 weeks ago. I didn't use any insect repellent the whole week that I was there.
Wow.
That's yeah, it's drastic. Um, and even when I go up to the Adirondacks now, I'll be going to the June Hamilton County Bird Festival. And last year, I don't think I used insect repellent in the Adirondacks.
Wow.
Yeah, things are, I mean, the terrible thing is, I have neighbors, I'm sure we all have neighbors who don't quite think the same as me. And, I tell them that and they're like, well, that's good, and, isn't it good that we get warmer winters? My oil bill's cheaper. But they don't realize the real impact that it's having on food chains, on the whole chain of life. If the insects
Mhm.
are gone, the birds will be gone, the pollination will be gone. It's cascades before you know it. But that's, I feel we're sort of like lemmings. We always seem to need to get right to the end of the cliff before suddenly we go, "Hey, we're all going to fall over if we don't stop what we're doing." It's what saved the egrets and the herons. It saved the buffalo. I just wish we didn't have to get that close to the edge to wake up.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in just briefly here to kind of wrap up a little bit. I do want to mention that our chapter is in the process of putting together a grassland conservation project that will cover parts of our operating region in our chapter area here in New York. But we're also looking at partnering with the Palmerito Foundation in Colombia, and that has uh, acreage in the Wisirare Conservation Area, which basically is a whole host of different habitats, including tropical savannas, wetlands, forests, floodplains, and like really rich biodiverse region. So we should have more information on that coming in the upcoming months. We are trying to fund kind of a first year start that will be mostly some research and some monitoring and breeding bird surveys and potentially Modis and nanotags in the Columbia region. And that kind of leads into that question on like the need for Modis um, in those hemispheric areas and nanotags. Can you just very briefly before we end,
Oh
um,
yeah.
talk a little bit about like how that ties in and how useful it is to try to get those pieces of infrastructure there?
Yeah, in trying to be brief, which I'm not good at, the there is a dark space that starts somewhere along in Mexico because there's tons of Modus antenna throughout Canada, throughout the US. But suddenly, as we hit that southern latitude, we don't get a lot of pings because uh, the terrain is very hilly and mountainous, and even if you have a tower, if the bird's flying low, it may not the signal that may not be picked up. We had that problem in the Nicaraguan highlands. We were tagging the wood thrushes right there, but then they were shooting down into the valley, and they weren't. The tower wasn't able to pick up the ping.
Hmm.
So even when you have the towers, it sometimes is tricky, and that's where you need our good friends from Birds Canada, who are now expert. They're the leaders in the Modus family, and they can really help in sighting and figuring those issues out. It is a really interesting technology. I encourage everyone to have a real scientific conservation question they're trying to answer before just putting the tags on the birds, because once again, every time we put something on a bird, that bird becomes a little bit slower than the other birds. And so that's, maybe the one that the falcon gets. Uh, and so we, if we're risking their lives, we should have a real good reason. Are we tracking the bird that I was pointed out, the American oyster catcher that flies from the Long Island Sound some way down. We know from the fact that it was banded in Georgia on its first year, but then it tracks somehow all the way over to the Pacific. And there's a significant population of Wilson's plover that are doing the same thing. And there's even some red knots. So questions like that. Where are these birds tracking across the isthmus? Is it Honduras? Is it Panama? If we could find that out, then we can really protect that corridor. So whenever we can find through their hard work, because they're the ones flying with these tags, real answers to conservation questions, it's really valuable. Um, it's it's something that we should be putting the towers into Central America, into Latin America, because that's where they're missing. That's where the data is missing. Um, I know we all want to have one in our sanctuaries so we can hear birds, going through. But if we're looking at it from a conservation perspective, yeah, putting them down there, and then putting the tags on there, depending on it's once again depending on the question that you're trying to have answered, um, and the birds themselves. We were in Nicaragua. We were trying to figure out. They get Louisiana water thrush in July. These birds are already hitting their wintering grounds. They've already bred and they're already back. So we were trying to figure out, are these southern, birds from Louisiana, from the southeast? Are they going further? But we didn't really want to impair the bird for a long time, so we were using tags that we were just gluing, and that the minute they molted, that tag would fall off. Other birds, you want at least one season because the battery's not going to last for more than a season, probably. So in that case, you're going to put a little harness, but once again, you're using product that tends to fall apart after 12 months. So you have your question, your hypotheses, figure out what the equipment needs are that will best enable you to answer that hypothesis, and then go to town. Because we have so many unanswered questions and we have so many spots on the migratory pathway that could help us in answering those questions.
Thank you, John, very, very much. This was great.
Oh, my pleasure. Always happy to see chapter people and engage, and we're all together in this. It'll only come about with us all together. So thanks for taking the time on a Friday night to learn.
And sharing your knowledge is priceless. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, John. Very inspiring, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for everybody for listening. And
Absolutely.
Yep.
we'll look on the bright side.
Yep. And everybody
Thank you.
get out tomorrow morning. The birds are coming.
You bet.
Okay.
Take care.
Good night.
Night, night.
All right. Bye now.